What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I'm testing out my iPhone. I actually have an iPhone 8. And the reason why I say that is I've been looking at all kinds of different video cameras for years and years and years. I've been checking out a lot of different things. And I have a bunch of different kinds. I have like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema. I've got the Blackmagic 4.6K Pro. I've used a lot of different cameras. I've got DSLRs. For me, I never really considered the iPhone to be a legitimate, never really considered it to be something you could legitimately record off of. And I saw a YouTube video where somebody was talking about that. They were addressing the issue of trying to record with an iPhone. And they said one of the problems that people will have is they'll say, okay, cool, like we're gonna record footage with an iPhone, and they'll just hold it. Well, if you hold the iPhone out, then like your arms are gonna start shaking, your hands are gonna start shaking about, and that'll be reflected in the footage that you record. Whereas if you attach it to like a gimbal or something like that, it'll stay still, you'll get more of a cinematic look. But I think that when it comes to shooting with an iPhone, and when it comes to like this shaky appearance, I think that actually works, depending on what circumstance you're talking about. There's a really cool video that I saw where they were talking about creating a seamless black background. And what they did is they basically took a guy and they put him in like a giant, huge warehouse, basically. And they put him pretty far away from the back wall. And then they eliminated all other sources of light except for a skylight that they put above him, and then it shot down. It was a soft light. And so what it did is it gave this impression that this guy was sitting in a completely black room with a single light source above him, and it was really dramatic, and it was actually very, very intimate for, depending on what topic you're talking about. And that's actually a technique that I'll use for a documentary that I have coming up, which we'll talk about here in a second. But one of the things that they were talking about was where they had a couple cameras, still cameras, their main cameras, that were focusing in on him. So they could get a distance shot so you could see his full body sitting in the chair. And then you could also get a more up close shot where you could basically get from like, the upper body up to the top of the head. What they were also doing is they were using basically, point and shoot cameras, things like some, the Panasonic GH5 or something along those lines. And they were just using those to get like side shots. And my thought was, why not use like an iPhone for that? Like, why buy a new camera? Why not just use an iPhone for that? It records in 1080p. And at this point, really, in the world of YouTube, 1080p is still the standard. 4K is getting to be the standard, but 1080p is still the standard by and large. And the reason why I say that is because 4K is really only a format that you find when it comes to like vloggers. When it comes to almost anybody else, people who play video games and upload them to YouTube, they still do it in 1080p, just because of the fact that a lot of the hardware needed, a lot of video cards needed to be able to play at 4K are getting extremely expensive because everybody's trying to hop on the Bitcoin train and make easy money. And so because of that, it's driving up the cost of video cards, which means that now it's less affordable than it used to be able to play in 4K, because in order to do that, you need something like 1080 Ti's or Titan graphics cards or something like that. You can do it with a 980 Ti if you do them and play them in SLI, but in terms of having 4K at ultra settings, you'll need some pretty high-end graphics cards to be able to pull it off. And so because of that, I think that a lot of people, when they look at this scenario of creating footage, they look at this scenario of like documenting things, it does make it pretty interesting in terms of how you can use an iPhone to be able to record footage. Again, 1080p is pretty much the standard outside of everything but vlogging. And so even like creating a documentary and throwing it out there. The only issue that I have is, as far as I know, I don't believe the iPhones record in 4K yet. I could be wrong about that. I'm not super knowledgeable about the video capabilities of the iPhone, which I should probably figure that out. And and if they are, well then of course you record in 4K. The issue with that is that recording in 4K eats up a lot of space. For example, with the Blackmagic 4.6K Pro, I can record in 4.6K, 4600 by some odd, something else. And if I do that in RAW on a 1 terabyte SSD, I'll get about 26 minutes of video footage. It rolls through stuff. It's because what you're basically doing is when you're shooting in RAW, you're getting like unedited, uncompressed, the actual raw video file, which is the best way to shoot, just because of the fact that you can go through, you can color correct. It's like taking pictures. You're better shooting in RAW than anything else, because it allows you more freedom in terms of altering the colors and the appearances of different things like that, which is why this is kind of interesting to me. Using Filmmaking Pro and then recording in a flat profile, will it give me the same abilities with color correction as shooting in RAW? That's kind of my question, shooting in log. But still, when it comes to any YouTuber, the idea is that if your channel grows and your channel starts to find financial success, meaning it becomes a viable source of income, then you shouldn't stop at your channel. Like you really shouldn't just look at your channel and say, okay, cool, like we're here, because your channel will lose popularity. A really good example is that there are a lot of YouTube channels out there that found a huge amount of success based on Dragon Ball Super. A lot of people were watching those videos and they loved Dragon Ball Super because it was basically a nostalgia trip. It took them all the way back to the days when they were watching Dragon Ball Z or even Dragon Ball. You know, if they're old enough to be able to have watched that show when it was really at its peak, you know, when it really began to sort of hit the airwaves. Because of that, a lot of people were going back and they were watching Super because it reminded them of days gone by, of easier points in life, and a show they really, really loved when they were younger. And so because of that, a lot of channels really exploded. But the issue is that Dragon Ball Super, for however long it'll be before it returns, is basically off the air. And so because of the fact that it's off the air, the question now becomes, what happens to those channels? And you're slowly starting to see this kind of decline on viewership, because people don't really see a reason to watch the channels anymore because there's nothing with Dragon Ball Super going on. Now, once Dragon Ball Super comes back, you know, the movies make their appearances or what have you, those channels will spike again. I don't want to be one of those YouTube channels that kind of gets stuck in that rut of, well, now I'm right back to working at a full-time job and right back where I was before I even got into YouTube in the first place. You know, the idea, no matter what measure of success you achieve in life, regardless of what kind of success you get, where that success comes from, the idea should always be parlay that out into something else. You know, the money that you're making, invest in something else. You know, invest in things so that you will always be able to be self-sustaining. That's what Justin Timberlake did. Justin Timberlake bought MySpace. Now, he bought it for virtual pennies compared to what it used to be worth back in 2002, 2003, 2004, like back what it used to be worth back then. I mean, he bought it for pennies in comparison to that, but he basically turned it into like a music platform. I don't really know if it's been financially viable since, you know, Justin Timberlake bought it, but still, the fact remains, that's an example of investing in yourself, investing in other projects outside of yourself, so that if your main source of income drops off, that you won't be left hanging. And for me, the big project, the big investment that I've wanted to look at for a long time is making a documentary, because I want to use it as a proof of concept. And the first doc that I'm going to make is going to be on Comic Historian. It's going to be on Benny. And it's basically going to be, this is Comic Historian. And it's going to be a documentary series that pretty much details the life and times of Benny. How he went from being a guy who lived in Rhode Island to becoming the biggest comic book YouTuber on YouTube. Like by views, by sub count, becoming the biggest comic book YouTuber. You know, how did he reach that point? How did that happen? You know, what were the things that he learned along the way? What was his life, you know, serving in the military, different things like that? It'll probably be about half an hour long, but it'll invoke interviews with his parents, you know, and it'll have more of an artistic feel. It won't just simply be, you know, like we talked to his mom, then we talked to his dad, and then we talked to other members of his family, then we talked to Natalie, his wife, and then so on and so forth. We probably won't go that route. It'll be more of a artistic kind of feel that's blended in with B-roll shots of Benny at comic book conventions and things like that. Really, when it comes to documentaries, you can't really plan ahead. You can know what footage you want to get and where you want to take shots, but documentaries are made on the editing floor. Like you go through and you say, actually, that would look really, really cool, and then you just roll it in. You just include it into the actual documentary itself. So again, you know, I'm really excited about it. It's my big project, like the big thing I'm working on. After Comic Historian, we'll do Comic Pop, and then I have no idea where I'll go from there. But still, it's interesting to me, because I've always wanted to have something big. I've always wanted to have something big to my name, that if all else fails, I can point back and I can say, I made that. Like, I made that thing right there. That thing belongs to me. I made that. I put my heart and soul into it. You know, I worked my butt off. You know, I hired the people that were necessary to be able to pull it off. But at the end of the day, it is my vision on how I believe this thing should function and exist. And I've wanted to do that for so long, and this has given me the opportunity to do it. And so, you know, I just want to tell you guys about that, because I just happen to be thinking about it, and I think it's so cool. I think it's such an awesome idea. I think we'll stick with this. You know, I think it gives more of an intimate feel in terms of just kind of talking in my living room. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and bounce off here, and I'm going to clean this place up because it really needs it. And I have no idea. I might put on Mad Men in the background or something like that. I do need to get caught up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., not Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Flash. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and bounce off here, and I will catch you all later. Peace.